The situation in the Persian Gulf is becoming more complicated with every passing day. On August 2nd, 2026, U.S. Central Command announced that its naval forces had already redirected dozens of commercial vessels, disabled 2 ships, and boarded 2 more while enforcing Washington's renewed maritime blockade against Iran. Just 24 hours later, those figures had climbed even higher, proving that the operation is expanding at a rapid pace. These aren't rumors circulating through anonymous officials or speculative media reports. They are official numbers released directly by the U.S. military, showing in detail how many vessels have been intercepted as they attempted to enter or leave Iranian ports. What makes this moment especially significant is that these military updates arrived at the exact same time Iranian officials revealed they were entering the final phase of negotiations with Oman regarding the future management of the Strait of Hormuz. While naval forces continue tightening enforcement at sea, diplomatic talks are unfolding behind closed doors in an effort to create a new framework for commercial shipping through one of the world's most strategic waterways. That unusual combination of military pressure and diplomatic engagement makes this far more than another routine blockade story. To understand what's really happening, we need to look beneath the headlines. The real story isn't simply about how many ships are being stopped or redirected. It's about a sophisticated contest between Iran's shadow shipping network and one of the world's most advanced surveillance systems. Every time a vessel attempts to disappear, American intelligence seems to locate it again, creating a continuous game of strategy, technology, and countermeasures that has turned the Strait of Hormuz into one of the most closely monitored maritime regions on Earth. To understand why this blockade has returned with such intensity, we have to go back several months. The United States first imposed its maritime restrictions on Iran on April 13, 2026, shortly after negotiations in Islamabad collapsed. Those talks had been expected to reduce tensions and move both sides toward a broader agreement. But when diplomacy failed, Washington responded by launching a large-scale naval operation aimed at restricting Iran's oil exports. That first phase remained in effect until mid-June, placing tremendous pressure on Tehran's economy. During those weeks, American officials claimed the blockade was draining nearly $500 million from Iran's economy every single day. According to CENTCOM, dozens of commercial vessels were intercepted, while several ships were seized outright for allegedly violating the restrictions. Independent maritime tracking organizations, however, reported that a number of tankers still managed to slip through the blockade. That contrast highlighted an important reality from the very beginning. The operation was never completely airtight. Instead, it became a constant struggle between enforcement efforts and increasingly sophisticated attempts to avoid detection. Although the restrictions were briefly eased as diplomatic discussions continued, that pause didn't last for long. The blockade resumed with even stronger enforcement measures, and the number of intercepted vessels has continued rising ever since. Every new report suggests the campaign is expanding, with more ships being redirected, inspected, or disabled as they attempt to move cargo linked to Iran. Since oil exports remain one of Tehran's most valuable sources of foreign income, every successful interception carries significant economic consequences, making this maritime confrontation one of the most important fronts in the wider conflict. Once a vessel is identified as a possible blockade violator, the process that follows is far more organized than many people realize. American naval forces first establish radio contact with the ship, requesting information about its identity, cargo, destination, and recent voyage history. If the vessel provides consistent information and there's no indication that it's connected to Iranian trade, it is generally allowed to continue its journey. This is one reason why many intercepted ships are redirected instead of being boarded. This is where the story becomes much more complex than a simple naval blockade. Iran has spent years building a sophisticated maritime network specifically designed to bypass international sanctions. Rather than relying on conventional shipping routes, this network uses aging commercial tankers operating outside normal regulations. Maritime experts commonly refer to it as the shadow fleet, ghost fleet, or dark fleet. Understanding how this hidden fleet operates and how American intelligence continues tracking it despite every effort to stay invisible is the key to understanding why this blockade has become one of the most technologically advanced maritime operations in recent history. The shadow fleet is made up of aging oil tankers, bulk carriers, and cargo vessels that operate far outside the normal rules of international shipping. Many of these ships sail without standard insurance, use complicated ownership structures, and register under flags from countries that require very little transparency. Their primary mission is simple: move sanctioned Iranian crude oil to buyers willing to accept the legal and financial risks. Over time, this hidden network has evolved into one of the most sophisticated sanction evasion systems operating anywhere in the world. Although similar tactics have recently been associated with Russian oil exports, Iran had already spent years perfecting many of these methods long before they became widely recognized. Together with Venezuela, it developed an operational model that other sanctioned nations later expanded upon. At the center of this strategy is the Automatic Identification System, commonly known as AIS. Under normal conditions, every commercial vessel continuously broadcasts its identity, location, speed, and destination to help prevent collisions and ensure safe navigation across busy waterways. The problem begins when a ship intentionally shuts off its AIS transmitter or starts broadcasting false information. Once that happens, the vessel effectively becomes a dark ship, attempting to disappear from conventional tracking systems while continuing its journey unnoticed. Investigations throughout this conflict have revealed multiple sanctioned tankers deliberately disabling or manipulating their AIS signals to hide both their identities and destinations. It is a carefully coordinated operation that requires technical expertise, precise timing, and cooperation across an entire network of vessels working together to avoid detection. These covert operations have done more than challenge international sanctions. They have also made the Strait of Hormuz significantly more dangerous for every vessel passing through it. One tragic example occurred in March 2026, when a commercial cargo ship sailing through the region was struck during the ongoing conflict. A fire quickly spread through this vessel, forcing an emergency evacuation. While many crew members were rescued, several sailors remained trapped on board, and recovery efforts continued for weeks before the operation was finally completed. That incident served as a powerful reminder that this confrontation extends far beyond economics and politics. The struggle between Iran's hidden shipping network and the international forces enforcing the blockade is unfolding in real waters, where ordinary merchant crews face life-threatening risks despite having no direct involvement in the conflict. Every voyage through the Strait now carries a level of uncertainty that simply didn't exist before tensions escalated. The methods used by the Shadow Fleet are equally sophisticated. Rather than transporting oil directly to its final destination, many tankers first load crude at Iran's main export terminals before making carefully planned stops at other ports along the way. These intermediate locations help disguise the cargo's true origin, making it appear as though the oil was loaded elsewhere. Maritime intelligence analysts have documented several cases in which tankers altered their routes and shipping records to conceal Iranian exports, creating a complex chain of movements designed to confuse investigators and avoid international enforcement efforts. Beyond disguising where the oil comes from, the Shadow Fleet depends heavily on ship-to-ship transfers, carried out far from busy commercial routes. Instead of delivering cargo directly to its final customer, one tanker meets another in international waters and quietly transfers the oil at sea. Once the exchange is complete, the second vessel continues the journey under a different identity, making it far more difficult for investigators to determine where the shipment originally came from. This technique has become one of the most effective tools for avoiding sanctions. Tracking organizations have identified one location after another where these operations regularly take place. One of the most active hubs has been the Eastern Outer Port Limits, or EOPL, off the coast of Malaysia. Throughout the conflict, dozens of tankers carrying Iranian crude have traveled to this anchorage before transferring their cargo onto other ships, bound primarily for China. Every additional transfer creates another layer of separation between the oil and its true origin, making the supply chain increasingly difficult to trace. The scale of this operation is far larger than many people realize. Maritime analysts have documented well over 100 tankers moving through these transfer points during different phases of the conflict, while dozens of Iranian-flagged vessels completed round trips between the Persian Gulf and Southeast Asia. Financial researchers estimate that this entire shadow shipping network has handled transactions worth billions of dollars, supported by a parallel system of shipping companies, financial channels, and logistics partners working together to keep Iranian oil flowing despite growing international pressure. With such an advanced smuggling network in place, the obvious question is this: how does the United States continue locating these ships? The answer lies in a surveillance system that goes far beyond tracking a vessel's AIS signal. Even if a tanker switches off its transponder and attempts to disappear electronically, it cannot erase its physical presence. These massive ships leave behind multiple detectable signatures that modern intelligence systems are specifically designed to identify and follow. Instead of depending on a single tracking method, analysts combine information from high-resolution satellite imagery, synthetic aperture radar, port activity records, shipping documentation, insurance data, and cargo intelligence. Synthetic aperture radar is especially valuable because it can detect large metal vessels regardless of darkness, heavy cloud cover, or poor weather conditions. In other words, a ship that believes it has become invisible by shutting off its AIS transmitter can still be located from space through entirely different surveillance technologies. Financial records provide another powerful layer of intelligence. Commercial tankers rely on insurance companies, management firms, flag registries, and banking networks to operate legally across international waters. Every one of those services creates documentation that investigators can compare with real-world vessel movements, When a ship suddenly disappears from electronic tracking, changes its identity, or follows suspicious routes that don't match its paperwork, those inconsistencies quickly attract attention. By combining physical surveillance with financial and administrative data, intelligence agencies are able to uncover hidden shipping patterns that would be almost impossible to detect using a single source of information alone. By combining all of these intelligence sources, analysts can recognize suspicious movement patterns even when a vessel is doing everything possible to avoid detection. Ships that suddenly disappear from AIS tracking near known transfer zones, take unusual routes that make little commercial sense, or repeatedly visit locations associated with sanctions. Evasion immediately draw attention. When these separate clues are connected, investigators can often reconstruct an entire voyage without relying on a single continuous tracking signal. Several real-world cases have demonstrated just how effective this layered surveillance system has become. During one operation, 2 tankers believed they had successfully disappeared after switching off their electronic transponders while sailing through the Indian Ocean. However, satellite imagery continued monitoring their movements, confirming that both vessels remained on course despite their attempt to hide. Their electronic signals vanished, but their physical presence was still visible from space, allowing intelligence agencies to follow their progress almost step by step. This reveals the biggest weakness in the Shadow Fleet's strategy. Turning off an AIS transmitter only defeats one method of tracking, while modern surveillance depends on multiple overlapping technologies working together. Even if electronic identification disappears, satellite imagery, radar systems, shipping records, financial documents, and cargo intelligence continue providing valuable information. That is why American officials are able to publicly report growing numbers of intercepted, redirected, and boarded vessels with increasing confidence, despite the constant efforts by shadow operators to stay hidden. Despite the success of the surveillance network, the battle at sea is far from over. Intelligence reports continue to describe the situation as an ongoing contest rather than a decisive victory for either side. While many commercial vessels comply with interception orders once contacted by naval forces, others continue experimenting with new routes, altered identities, and more sophisticated concealment methods. As one side improves its detection capabilities, the other constantly adapts its tactics, turning this into a continuous technological race with no clear endpoint. Iran has also responded in ways that extend beyond simply protecting its own oil shipments. During different stages of the conflict, Iranian authorities detained commercial cargo vessels in what many observers viewed as retaliatory actions against the American-led blockade. These incidents have increased the risks for international shipping throughout the Strait of Hormuz, forcing companies to reconsider their routes and raising concerns among global trade organizations. As tensions continue to grow, insurance costs for vessels operating in the region have risen significantly, adding another layer of economic pressure on the worldwide shipping industry. The reason Iran continues investing so heavily in this shadow shipping network is ultimately economic survival. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most important energy corridors on the planet, carrying a substantial share of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas. For Tehran, oil exports represent one of the few remaining sources of valuable foreign currency. Every tanker that successfully reaches its destination provides critical revenue, making the enormous costs of maintaining this hidden maritime network worthwhile, despite the growing risks of interception and increasingly sophisticated international surveillance. As this renewed blockade continues, one fact has become increasingly clear. Iran's shadow fleet remains active, adaptable, and capable of moving significant amounts of oil despite growing international pressure. At the same time, the United States has demonstrated that its surveillance network is far more advanced than simply monitoring ship transponders. By combining satellite imagery, radar technology, shipping records, financial intelligence, and real-time analysis, authorities continue identifying vessels that attempt to disappear, proving that modern maritime enforcement relies on an entire web of interconnected intelligence rather than a single tracking system. At the same time, diplomacy continues to unfold alongside military operations. Iran's ongoing discussions with Oman over the future management of the Strait of Hormuz could eventually reshape how commercial traffic moves through one of the world's most strategic waterways. China also remains a critical part of this equation, serving as the primary destination for much of Iran's exported oil. As long as buyers remain willing to purchase discounted crude, the shadow fleet will continue searching for new ways to bypass restrictions, while surveillance agencies refine even more advanced methods to stop them. The contest is evolving on both sides, and neither appears ready to back down. This is far more than a story about ships being intercepted at sea. It is a technological battle involving satellites orbiting thousands of miles above Earth, radar systems capable of tracking vessels through darkness and storms, financial investigations exposing hidden ownership networks, and intelligence analysts piecing together thousands of data points to reveal movements that were meant to stay hidden. As this confrontation develops, both the blockade and the Shadow Fleet will continue adapting, making the Strait of Hormuz one of the most closely watched regions in the world. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more detailed analysis of the latest geopolitical developments as they unfold.